Hello friends, welcome to your ReFresh lesson for November, Food Systems. Today we are going to discuss how foods get from the farm to our plate. Let's get started. November is time for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving started as a celebration of gratitude for the foods grown and harvested in early America. What foods do you think were served at the first Thanksgiving? And how do you think the Native Americans and Pilgrims got these foods? From the grocery store? In the time of the first Thanksgiving, all food had to be grown, hunted, or traded. There were no grocery stores or refrigerators, so some foods had to be prepared and eaten quickly, or processed or preserved to eat later. The first Thanksgiving meal probably had venison or deer meat, corn, berries, clams, walnuts, squash, and beans. Today, our Thanksgiving menu not only consists of different foods, but those foods have very different journeys from the farm to your plate. While we are thinking of giving thanks, let's take a moment to create a list of Thanksgiving foods that you're grateful for. Let's focus on one that may or may not be on your list, sweet potato pie. What is the main ingredient in sweet potato pie? Sweet potatoes, of course. And where would you buy sweet potatoes for your pie? Perhaps at the grocery store or farmer's market? Our sweet potatoes, however, didn't grow at the store. They came from a farm where they were harvested or picked and packed to send to the store or the farmer's market. How about our whole pie? How does that get to our table? We could buy a pie at the grocery store, or we could make it ourselves from scratch. Let's transport ourselves to Thanksgiving preparations. What are some of the pros, reasons for, and cons, reasons against, buying a food that's prepared, also known as processed, like our pie, versus buying the ingredients in their original form, like the sweet potatoes for our pie, which we can eat whole or use in our pie? Pause the video here to write down some of your ideas. So what are some pros and cons for buying our pie already made? Some of the pros might be time. It's quick to buy and reheat if needed. Taste, we just like it. And it requires only basic skills to reheat if needed. Now let's take a look at the cons. The cost may be higher for a prepared pie versus making one ourselves. The taste also may not be exactly what we want. There may be sugar or other ingredients that we don't want or need, and it's also a processed food. You may have come up with some other great ideas. Let's pause for a moment to talk about that last point, processed foods. We call the pie from the store a processed food because it was created through many steps and the combination of many ingredients, usually at a factory. Salt, sugar, fat, and artificial ingredients are often added. In other words, the food has gone through a process to change from its original form. So why do we process foods? Foods are processed to make them last longer, like canned or frozen sweet potatoes, or to create new foods that people want to buy, like our pie. There is a range of how processed foods can be. For example, a sweet potato is a vegetable that you buy at the store. It is not processed at all. It contains lots of nutrients and fiber that are good for our bodies. Speaking of good for our bodies, let's take a quick moment to pause the video for a dance break or a good stretch. Now back to our sweet potatoes. Our whole sweet potatoes can take a few different adventures. First, they could be chopped, cooked, and frozen, or cooked and canned into mashed sweet potatoes. Ingredients: sweet potatoes. These potatoes have similar nutrients and fiber to our whole sweet potato. We can also make these at home, from scratch. This is an example of a minimally processed food. They could also be cooked and canned into candied sweet potatoes, sometimes called candied yams. Ingredients: sweet potatoes, water, corn syrup, and sugar. These have less fiber and more sugar than our whole or canned sweet potatoes, and they are slightly more processed. We can also make these from scratch at home. Or our sweet potatoes could be chopped and cooked into sweet potato fries. Ingredients:
sweet potatoes, vegetable oil, contains one or more of the following: high oleic canola, sunflower, modified food starch, corn, potato, tapioca, sugar, rice flour, cornstarch, dextrin, salt, leavening, disodium dihydrogen pyrophosphate, sodium bicarbonate, coloring, annatto, turmeric, dextrose, xanthan gum.
Phew! These have a bit more fat and sugar than our whole sweet potato, along with more salt and some ingredients we don't recognize. The sweet potatoes have been through a lot of processing to make these prepared sweet potato fries. We can also make these at home from scratch using just sweet potatoes, oil, and salt, or any of your other favorite seasonings. Lastly, they could be cooked and mixed with other ingredients to make our sweet potato pie. Ingredients:
sweet potatoes, water, sugar, enriched flour, wheat flour, niacin, reduced iron, thiamine mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid, vegetable oil, soybean, palm, skim milk, eggs, corn syrup, contains 2% or less, modified cornstarch, salt, carrageenan, natural flavor, nutmeg, dextrose, tryptophan gum, citric acid, potassium sorbate, preservative.
These have less fiber and more fat, saturated fat, sugar, and salt than our whole sweet potato, and some really strange sounding ingredients. Tragacanth gum? We can also make this at home from scratch. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Remember when we were talking about pros and cons earlier in the video? Let's continue that conversation with what we just learned about processed foods. Let's look at the pros and cons for buying the ingredients for our pie and making it from scratch or homemade. Some of the pros may include that you get to use fresh ingredients and you know what they are. You can make the pie taste however you want. It's fun if you like to cook, and if you have leftover sweet potatoes, you can use them in other recipes or eat them by themselves. Some of the cons may be that it takes time to turn all of those ingredients into a pie. You need skills to know how to make the pie. The cost of buying all of the ingredients may be more expensive if you don't have some of them at home. And using the ingredients. Will you be using these in other recipes? What other pros and cons did you come up with? Whether you buy a pie already made or make your own is up to you. We're going to shift our attention back to those sweet potatoes. We previously mentioned how sweet potatoes are grown on the farm and harvested or picked and packed and then sent on a truck to the store or the farmer's market where we can buy them. What would this process look like for our sweet potato pie? With all this discussion about potatoes, let's make sure we don't turn into some. Let's take a look and move a bit too. The main ingredient for our sweet potato pie starts as, you guessed it, sweet potatoes. Our sweet potatoes start on the farm. Pretend you're a farmer driving your tractor around your farm. They are then picked and packed into boxes. Our sweet potatoes grow under the ground, so reach down low to pull up a stubborn sweet potato. Those boxes then go into trucks. Pull your arm down like you're blowing a truck horn. The trucks then take the sweet potatoes to a factory where they are processed, washed, cooked, and mixed with other ingredients into the sweet potato pie. Use your hands and arms to pretend you are smashing all of the sweet potatoes. Back to the truck they go. Honk your truck horn. The truck then takes the sweet potato pie to the store for us to buy. Pretend you're a cashier scanning items at the checkout. Now let's speed up these actions and see how fast we can process the sweet potato pie. We start off at the farm. Then we pick and pack. To the truck. Mash and mix at the factory. Honk honk. Scan as quick as you can. Now try it on your own. Wow, that's a lot of steps. Instead of buying sweet potato pie at the store, you can also make your own at home, which means fewer steps in the process, from the farm, to the truck, to the grocery store, to your house. And you can choose your ingredients to make it healthy and delicious. Try using this recipe for sweet potato casserole, a healthy version of sweet potato pie filling. Check out the recipe at this link.